again, we welcome everyone to this webinar. Of course, as I mentioned, I'll be taking you through the value propositions of Microsoft Windows Virtual Desktop and how it can help you reshape the way your employees deliver productivity within your organizations. All right, so many times when we mention VDIs, virtual desktops and whatnot, what comes to mind many times is not clear to so many people, all right? So you can simply refer to Windows Virtual Desktop as a desktop as a service. And what it majorly delivers is to ensure that you have your employees delivering value wherever they are, anytime, anywhere, on any device. All right. So there are quite a number of scenarios that makes people opt for virtual desktops. All right. One is security and regulations, and what I mean by that is you agree with me that it's an Herculean task to actually get most endpoints or all endpoints within your organization secured, patched, and I'm talking about mobile phones inclusive and tablets, and it involves a lot. You have to take care of a whole lot of policies, engage a lot of tools and all of that, right? And we find this coming across sometimes from the financial services sector, where there's requirement to have certain level of protection for endpoints, all right? Healthcare also have that kind of requirement as well as government. And you would find out that with this kind of requirements, you need to be able to deliver this on the fly. And many times when we have elastic workforce, maybe in a merger and acquisition scenario, you would have most, especially maybe banks, or whatnot, you have a very high number of workforce at that point. You probably need to make some acquisitions at that point with regards to endpoints, laptops, desktops, and whatnot, because you now have increased workforce. Some will probably depreciate and all of that. In that case, Windows Virtual Desktop comes in very handy because it's endpoint that has all you require delivered to you in a matter of seconds. Short-term employees. Sometimes it could be tantamount to waste of resources to provide short-term employees with this kind of assets. I mean, laptops and desktops. When they are gone, what happens to those laptops? They become useless. It means you've tied down money. All right, and maybe the next time you have another set of short-term employees, those laptops are outdated. You probably need to augment. All right, and another is in the case of contractor and partner access. So for example, in the O&G sector, that's the oil and gas sector, you have a lot of collaborations from different upstreams, downstreams, organizations, bringing in different contractors and all of that. And the churn rate is high. Contractors sometimes may stay 6 months, sometimes more than 6 months and whatnot. So it's quite flexible to engage Windows Virtual Desktop, with this kind of categories of employees, all right? So you're not tying capital down by buying PCs, and whatnot. Again, in some organizations, we have BYOD employees, BYOD users, right? Or we call them road warriors or branch workers, where they are quite mobile. They need to be able to deliver productivity everywhere they find themselves, on any device, be it tablet, be it mobile phone, be it PC and whatnot. And what resonates with me more at this time, of this pandemic era is the call centers. When there was lockdown, um, uh, a lot of call centers had to re-engineer the way they work. Rerouting calls to mobile phones of their employees, making sure they're able to attend to customers and whatnot. And for many of those organizations that didn't have this kind of virtual desktop infrastructure in place, it was quite erratic in the way they attended to customers. All right, but in the case where you have Windows Virtual Desktop, all the call center user or employee needed to do at that point was from the phone or his or her own personal laptop, log on to the WVD environment, that's the Windows Virtual Desktop environment, gain access to all productivity tools that is required to deliver on the job, the ERP, the CRM, the office productivity tools and whatnot, taking calls and all of that. So Windows Virtual Desktop makes it quite seamless. And another category of users are the people we categorize as the power users. All right, the power users are like the graphics designer, the animators, the architects, the engineers that require high GPU compute power to be able to process images, to be able to process their designs and whatnot. In most cases, many of these engineers have their endpoints, highly spec'd, but it gets to a point where those endpoints are inadequate to deliver because the job require more processing power at that time. Then what would you do? You probably have to augment by buying some components, maybe upgrade the RAM, upgrade the hard drive to SSD or whatnot, or the size of the hard drive, or buy a new laptop entirely or a new desktop entirely. In the case of WVD, for this kind of requirements, it's a matter of scaling. You scale them from one size of compute to another per time when they require it. So you're not tying money down. You get the speed, you get the power whenever you need it, and you can scale down when they are not using it. Or perhaps the software and dev test scenario where there are a lot of testing that needs to be carried out. And you have these people carrying out the UAT. You can also spin up WVD to aid. All right. So I'm just going to play a minute video just to show us how some organizations are attending to, are leveraging WVD and also attending to remote work. All right. But just before that, this is delivered on Windows 10. All right. Looking at the new wave of how work should be, it's not just about productivity alone. There has to be security, right? So Windows 10 is considered to be one of the most secured endpoint operating system today. And Office 365 is categorized as the #1 worldwide, in terms of productivity. All right. So this experience is delivered by Azure and also Windows 10 and Office 365. Then you can also onboard your existing RDS desktop to Microsoft Azure to deliver this and scale in minutes. All right, so let me just play the video.
In this time of digital transformation, businesses are shifting to a modern desktop to empower their people. But not all employees sit in an office, use only one device, or always work from secure locations. What if you could deliver a modern desktop experience to every worker, everywhere? Introducing Windows Virtual Desktop, the full Windows experience virtualized in the cloud. Always up to date and available on any device. Optimized for Office 365, so you can deliver the most productive experience to your users. Delivered on Azure, so IT can quickly virtualize and deploy modern and legacy desktops. The best virtual desktop experience, delivered on Azure. Windows Virtual Desktop.
Yes, so if you look closely at the video, you find out that employees were able to access all the tools they require to deliver on the job, be it on their mobile phone. You can have the full desktop experience on your mobile phone. Shortly after presenting this solution to you, my colleague would be taking you through a demo, which you see most of these things that we're talking about, all right? So one of the key benefits is the fact that you have what we call the multi-session Windows 10 experience. So again, this brings to mind value. If I was supposed to provide laptops to 50 employees within my organization today, that means that I'm buying a particular spec of laptop for 50 people. It means 50 pieces of laptops. Meanwhile, you can have what we call the pool experience on Windows Virtual Desktop that sits on Azure, where users can use the same compute power, the same endpoints, the same laptops, so to speak, sitting in the cloud. They can use the same one to carry out their different activities, and at the same time have a persistent profile, where their profile is isolated, quite consistent, in terms of delivering your files with OneDrive, with your Outlook, the OST files and whatnot is quite isolated. Every time you log in, you find your files where you left them the last time, all right? So the multi-session experience is quite mind-blowing, but at the same time, for some users, maybe the power users always prefer to have a single session Windows 10 desktop, meaning the desktop is assigned to only the user per time. So if you have 10 power users within your environment, you may allow them, you may avail them this opportunity to have the single session Windows 10 experience, where they fully own the desktop 24/7 or wherever they need it per time, all right? And the truth is, you can actually access your ERPs, your legacy applications and whatnot via this Windows Virtual Desktop experience, all right? Then if you already have Windows 7 VDI environment on premises, you can migrate this Windows 7 environment into Azure, and you have free extended security updates, all right? So if you are supposed to buy security updates now, it's quite expensive for Windows 7, Windows Server 2008, R2, SQL, and whatnot. But if you are migrating this from on-premises to the cloud, then it comes to you as free. You won't be paying any extra for it. And as I mentioned earlier, the optimization that it delivers, with regards to Office 365 ProPlus is mind-blowing, all right? With regards to PowerPoint, Excel, Microsoft Word, Outlook, and whatnot, all right? So the profile containers makes it a little bit faster in terms of accessing your files and folders per time. Also, migrating the existing Windows Server RDS that you have on premises, you can do this leveraging certain third-party tools, and you won't be breaking anything by migrating to the cloud. And you would have more speed, more compute power. You can pool these resources, and again, you can have everything the way you have it on premises in the cloud post migration. All right. So if you already have Windows Server 2012 or 2012 R2 or 2016 hosting your RDS environment on premises, you can easily migrate this to the cloud, and you won't be paying anything extra except for the compute, except for the server and the storage power that you require in the cloud. All right. And one of the things that this also brings to mind is the fact that you can deploy and scale in minutes. So for example, if I was supposed to acquire endpoints, for my remote workforce, let's pick call center, for example. Now that call centers are not working fully, all right, because of the lockdown, it means that I have to provide them with something to work. So if I'm supposed to do that, I'll have to first acquire the laptops. I'll buy laptops. I would have to furnish the laptops with the right endpoint security, the office applications, and worry about how those laptops would connect to the ERP, to the CRM, maybe by leveraging SSL VPN and whatnot, So it's quite cumbersome. But with Windows Virtual Desktop delivered on Azure, you can spin up a desktop in less than 10 minutes. It's up and running, connected to your office applications, connected. You can also have it connected to your ERPs and whatnot. Later on, I'm going to be showing us what the architecture looks like if you're either running natively in the cloud or you have your infrastructure on premises. I mean, your ERP and CRM on premises, all right? So the management from Azure Portal is quite fluid. And in terms of security and compliance, you have top-notch security and compliance features on Azure, and also leveraging Office 365 tools, all right? So what have I said in the last 5 minutes? You have full Windows 10 and Office 365 experience on the Windows Virtual Desktop, either single session or multi-session. It's optimized for Office 365 ProPlus. You can migrate your existing Windows Server RDS to Azure without spending extra money on software or upgrade or whatever. You only pay for the compute that you consume, and you can deploy and scale this in minutes, all right? So the kind of security you have on Windows Virtual Desktop, I can break it down for you in terms of identity protection, in terms of conditional access. You can restrict where people can log in from. Maybe you can restrict to only Ghana, or maybe Ghana, Nigeria, or West Africa, depending on where you think you have your operations. So you don't have people logging in from locations that you do not have presence, right? So for the existing RDS or VDI infrastructure you have, again, the only thing you'll be spending on is compute in the cloud. Software cost is taken off you because you already have investments in that. And Azure is quite productive, all right? So in terms of productivity, you can trust Azure. Even Microsoft 365 is hosted on Azure as of today, and you have billions of users authenticating, consuming Office 365 services, and organizations also leveraging the compute power on Azure. Then for enterprises that have their ERPs and CRMs on premises, you can leverage the hybrid feature of Azure to deliver this Windows Virtual Desktop experience by establishing maybe VPN via your internet, or leveraging what we call the express route, which is similar to MPLS, all right? Then you gain more intelligence into how your users are using this desktop, all right? They don't have to complain to you before you then react in terms of scaling their capacity up, in terms of the compute, all right? So it's quite intelligent enough to understand the number of users based on the criteria you've set, and it scales, per time. It's trusted in terms of security and compliance. So Microsoft Azure has over 150 security and compliance certifications. All right, this is a public knowledge in the public domain, so you can actually view that. All right. So looking at the high-level architecture of Windows Virtual Desktop, yes, it utilizes Azure Active Directory for authentication, but again, this has to be in conjunction with either your domain controllers hosted on premises on Azure, or Azure domain services, which is a PaaS service that functions as a domain controller. So if you look at the right side of my screen, Microsoft manages the web access, the gateway, the load balancing, the broker, and whatnot. And you get to manage your subscription, what happens within your subscription, how you provision the VMs, the number of VMs you have in a pool, the number of VMs that is a multi-session or single session and whatnot, then the compute, the storage, and network is also managed by Microsoft. However, you have the responsibility to deploy this in the best optimized way. And the beautiful thing is that you can manage this WVD infrastructure with your existing System Center configuration manager or Microsoft Intune, which is going into what we call the Microsoft Endpoint Manager. All right. So it's quite seamless. You can connect to your on-premises seamlessly. Now there is something quite beautiful. You've heard me talk about the containerization of profile. What brings this to life on Windows Virtual Desktop is called the FSLogix technology, all right, where you have persistent profiles every time you log in to your WVD environment. In fact, many times when you also have to redeploy the WVD pool, perhaps you've just added more applications to the pool, to the image, and you redeploy into the pool, it's consistent. So on any device you access anytime, you have a persistent profile, okay? Then we have what we call the app masking. So like I mentioned, you can easily deploy app into your existing image. We call it golden image. You can deploy apps into it, then redeploy the gold image into the pool. All right. Then it also does what we call the Java redirection. All right. So it helps protect the enterprise from vulnerabilities of multiple installed versions of Java and whatnot. So the question most customers ask is, okay, so how do I get started with WVD in terms of license, in terms of cost? So if you have investments in Microsoft 365 licenses already, all right, you already are eligible for WVD, all right? So if you also have what we call the virtual desktop services sitting on Windows 7, you also have access to WVD that can sit on Azure today. If you have RDS Cloud licenses with active software assurance, you know, for your existing on-premises RDS service, you are also eligible for WVD. However, what you only need to pay for is the virtual machines, like I mentioned, which comprises of the compute, the storage, then the additional security features that you may be leveraging. Later, also in this presentation, I'll be taking us through how to calculate your cost. So again, cloud business is open. You have access to calculate what your consumption will be like, so you can adequately project your cost, you know, and put pen to paper to know what you'll be consuming, especially with the 1 year and 3 year reserved instances. All right. Same thing with FSLogix. If you have all of these listed licenses, you already are entitled to this. So it's pretty much straightforward. Nothing is stopping us from engaging the WVD infrastructure, all right? Especially with the fact that you may not even be consuming up to 310 hours in a month, for example, because you probably do not work around the clock. We'll see all these metrics when we are doing the calculation of WVD using the pricing calculator. So briefly, I'll take us through what the deployment overview looks like before we go into the demo. All right. So if you look at this diagram, it's like a full-fledged architecture. All right, but there may be few variables. So as I mentioned to you, the broker and the gateway load balancing mechanism and all of that is managed by Microsoft. So when a user tries to eat the WVD infrastructure, it goes through the Microsoft management data plane before it then eats the Active Directory. The Active Directory then checks for conditional access, all right? Then the conditional access provides based on the conditions that have been set. Then you have access to your WVD infrastructure. Now, if you look at the Azure subscription, beneath it, there's the Azure AD Domain Services. So if you are a cloud native organization, meaning you really do not have anything on premises, this is the best architecture for you. You know, no need for VPN. All your services run in the cloud. You can deploy Azure Domain Services integrated with Azure Active Directory. You know, but meanwhile, for you to be able to leverage the MFA and conditional access, you need the Azure AD Premium license plan. You know, so which is covered in Microsoft 365 licenses. All right. So behind the Azure Domain Services is what we call the host pool. So take, for example, if I have maybe 25 users that will be using the WVD infrastructure, all right, and they are light users, depending on the things they do, we can deploy, we can say the WVD infrastructure should comprise of 4 virtual machines, you know, with Windows 10 multi-sessions enabled, all right? On top of all of this, you have the Office 365 licenses, which allows them to be able to do their regular documents, editing, you know, Outlook, OneDrive, and whatnot. Now, if you look below, beside the Office 365 icon, you have the storage solutions. So there are 3 storage methods that you can take advantage of. You can leverage the Azure files, NetApp files, or if you already have what we call the file server system that sits on the virtual machine, you can also leverage that to deliver the containerization of the profile. Now, for the security and management of the WVD, you can leverage the Intune that you already have in your Microsoft 365 license to manage the WVD or your SCCM. All right. Then for the endpoint security, you'll be leveraging Windows Defender ATP. It doesn't also matter if you have third-party endpoint security software. You can also have that installed, all right? So it depends on how you really want to deploy the infrastructure. Now, if you look on the left, on the right side, there are quite a number of supporting services that are listed. So for example, you may want to take backup of your image such that if anything happens to the region where you've hosted the infrastructure, you can easily fail over to the next one, you know, or have your data backup. Then Azure Security Center would help you look at your security posture. All right. Again, you can also deploy what we call the virtual appliance to sit ahead of your WVD infrastructure. All right. So the virtual appliance could be Sophos, it could be FortiGate, it could be Checkpoint, you know, it could be any of the appliances you are used to. All right, so that also manages access to the WVD infrastructure, you know, and what have you. Then the automation part is what does the auto scaling and auto management of the WVD infrastructure, which leverages the log analytics. All right, Azure Bastion helps you manage your WVD environments, you know, without having to do RDP over public IP into those virtual machines, you know, especially when you have to redesign your golden image. Then you can use Azure policy for governance of the platform, who has access to what, who can shut down, who can restart, you know, who can scale and whatnot. All right, so the prerequisites is quite simple. Like we mentioned, have your Azure subscription. Azure Active Directory is basic. It comes with every Azure subscription, all right? Then you determine your identity strategy. Are you going to be leveraging your on-premises domain controller, or you're going to be leveraging Azure Active Directory domain services, all right? So for the domain controller, you can either set the domain controller on Azure or sit the domain or leverage the existing domain controllers you have on premises. Yeah. Then you determine all the associated resources, you know, you want, aside from the virtual network, the storage, you know, and whatnot. The other services, you decide if you want to consume backup, if you want to consume the other security solutions like the firewall, the virtual appliance, and whatnot. So that's also dependent on you and your budget for the project. Excuse me, and also the required credentials. So for you to be able to deploy, you need to have the global admin rights to the subscription, to the tenant. You need to also have some kind of contributor owner rights to subscription, and being able to spin up the WVD service. All right. So if you're accessing from a mobile phone, a tablet, or desktop, this is the flow. So you can access over your browser. You can also download the RD client, on top of all of these devices across Android, iOS, Windows. Then you'll be able to access your WVD infrastructure. All right. So again, for the network requirement, like I mentioned, you need to then also decide how you want to connect your on-premises infrastructure to the WVD infrastructure on Azure. Mainly for enterprise. Most small businesses are probably running natively on the cloud, but for enterprises that have heavy investment on premises in terms of CRM, ERP, and all other line of business applications, you can leverage the site-to-site VPN, so for authentication purposes, for connectivity purposes to those applications on premises. All right. You can leverage express routes as well. Okay, so these are the pros and cons of your strategy depending on what you choose. All right, so the pros of spinning up a domain controller on Azure is that you can sync with on-premises DC, via the VPN or express route. All right, you have familiar AD group policies that you can reuse, for the purpose of the WVD management. All right, then virtual machines can be paused or stopped when needed to reduce cost. But the con is the overhead of running a full AD deployment on Azure. All right. So for cloud-based organizations, cloud-native organizations, if you use the ADDS, all right, you have it's quite great for test or isolated environment that do not need connectivity to on-premises. So if you do not have any line of business on premises, this may also suit you, greatly. But the con of this is that you have fixed charges per month. So unlike the virtual machine that you can stop, you can shut down and bring up, the ADDS service is a pass service that runs 24/7. All right. So for the hybrid organizations, where you leverage VPN or express route to authenticate on premises, meaning you don't have VM spawn on Azure as a domain controller or ADDS, all your domain controllers are on premises. You're only leveraging the VPN to connect to them for authentication. The con is that the latency could be increased, adding delays to user authentications to VMs. All right, and this assumes you have an on-premises environment not suitable for cloud-only test as well. Then the overhead of running full AD deployments on premises, in case you don't have and you want to deploy on premises. Okay, so this is what the infrastructure looks like for cloud native organizations. So you leverage the ADDS. Then in terms of the hybrid organization, this is what the workflow looks like. You have your on-premises environment connected to Azure environment. Then you also have the AD Connect syncing with Azure AD to ensure you have single ID and single password. All right. Then users can sign into the WVD environment, via this. All right. So these are just the bits you need to look at when you are creating the WVD environment. All right. So in the deployment, you have what we call the full desktop. So if what you want your users to have access to is a full desktop, meaning the entire Windows 10 desktop, having access to different types of apps and whatnot, you can have that. And you can also restrict users to having access to just certain applications. All right. So meaning it presents to them only the application and not just the full desktop. All right. So we've talked about the benefits of FSLogix, which is the containerization, persistent profiles and whatnot. And you can have different storage architecture, like we mentioned. Then the Office 365 container is also, it has what we call the cached data. So in the case where you have network-based container, we talked about the app masking, all right, where you have your roaming profiles for Outlook OST, OneDrive cache, Windows search, and whatnot. All right, then we also have the Java redirection. Okay, so this is what the storage looks like in terms of planning the storage. So you can either leverage Azure files, or you leverage a VM that has file services, file share services installed, or you can also leverage NetApp, to store those profiles. All right, so very quickly we'll move into the demo, which I'll be handing over to my colleague Ijeoma to take you through the demo. Then we'll come back to look at the pricing, and how you can begin to consume these services. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Olawale, for the technical presentation on WVD. You emphasized the use cases, how cloud-only customers can, benefit from the solution, and how it can be connected to on-prem Office applications, using VPN, application proxy, or express routes, like you mentioned. And you also emphasized how one can, implement business continuity by backing up the infrastructure. You mentioned the intelligence inbuilt, the solution, using conditional access and multi-factor authentication to ensure security is not compromised. Thank you very much for that insight. So what I find very interesting mostly about WVD is the native intelligence, to containerize persistently the user profiles, and for Outlook, for Teams, for OneDrive, using FSLogix, and these profiles are stored, using different storage models, like you mentioned Azure, you mentioned NetApp, and VMs, without compromising security, by layering different solutions, on top of them. Thank you very much. So my colleague Ijeoma Mbaneme will be doing a brief demo on WVD. She's a team lead for Modern Workplace, at Cloudware. She has vast experience in enabling productivity and modernizing workplace tools. She has touched the length and breadth of cloud migrations, Windows OSs, and applications virtualization. So she'll be showing us the user side experience of WVD and how it can be accessed, on the web, using the remote app and mobile, and how the different profiles, are stored. So over to you, Ijeoma Mbaneme.